Today we're going to talk about teaching movement. Okay. Now, let me start out by saying my school I talk about a million times that I was in, it was in the inner city. Okay. So movement to these kids was, like drop it like it's hot and anything to do with hip hop. So when I took my ORF training and I got certified in level 1 and I tried to bring some of this stuff back to my classroom, the kids looked at me like I was a crazy person. I mean, so the strategies I'm going to help you with are things that I did that it took my students a while to get comfortable with. And that's the main thing I want to tell you is you have to get comfortable teaching movement, and then your students will feed off of that. And it will take a little bit for them to get comfortable with what you're doing, especially if it's new. That was my case anyways. You may have students that are just like, sure, let's do this folk dance. And I'm telling you, I did not have that experience. Let's go ahead and talk movement. I'm going to talk about different types of movement you can do. And then I have some resources laying here I want to show you that I have found beneficial. And then also different ways to teach movement to different grade levels or demographics of students. I have to take a drink. Just a second. I'm so sorry. Good old Powerade, right? Okay, so let's get started. There's different types of movement. I'm looking down because I'm reading notes I took. Creative movement. Let's talk about creative movement in your classroom. There's different ways to do creative movement. And just like I preach all the time, there's no wrong way. There's no wrong way to do movement in your room. There's no wrong way to teach instruments. There's no wrong way to teach rhythms. We just had a whole session about songwriting. You do what's comfortable to you. If there's another teacher doing, 45 minutes of movement in her classroom every single time she sees her students, and you're not comfortable doing that, then don't. It's the pointers I'm giving you and the strategies I give you to use in your classroom. You don't have to use every one of them. You don't have to teach everything I'm going to show you today. You take what's relevant to you, your personality, your students, and your school setting, and you tweak it. I don't like that word. Well, you know what I'm trying to say. You make it your own, if that makes sense. That's what I've always done. 9 million workshops, ORF level trainings, Kadai trainings, online trainings, whatever trainings. I would take what I learned and then go, well, that's great. And I completely agree with it, but I know my students and I know that they're going to look at me like, yeah, right. We're not doing that. No, I'd get Miss Peresta. I'm not doing that. So that's exactly how it would go. So I want to go ahead. And so we're going to talk about creative movement. And I wanted to preface it with saying, when I talk to you about creative movement, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm not doing that, or my students aren't doing that, that's okay. Fast forward to the next point. Okay. All right. So one of my favorite ways to do creative movement is with scarves. And I don't have one in front of me. We'll use this piece of paper. I have a receipt right here. Okay. We'll pretend this is a scarf. I forgot to grab one before I started this video. I feel like today it's like squirrel. I just feel like, I don't know, adrenaline's going or something. But okay. So this is my scarf. Scarves are very inexpensive, by the way, and you can find them on Amazon. I don't know if on the resources page on my website, thedomesticmusician.com, I don't know if I've included scarves, but anyways, you can find them on Amazon. And basically, you hand each child a scarf, okay? This is one of my favorite things to do because I don't know what it is about the tactile thing. I think when kids have something in their hand, but also getting to move. And you notice when they're holding something in their hand like a scarf, they just get really creative. I think we talked about that, the same thing with songwriting and improvising. Kids are a lot more creative than we give them credit for. So I was a little, leery about handing these children scarves and telling them, okay, move, and being like, they're going to look at me like, what do you want me to do with a scarf? Like, what? I don't get it. But they got so creative and loved it, even my upper elementary kids. So here's different things you do. You hand them, a scarf, And there's different things. First thing you can do is called paintbrush. And so basically you tell them you're inside your bubble. Okay, we talk about personal bubble. That's something I'm going to talk about in a minute. But personal bubble and then their bubble that can move around. Okay, so we're in our personal bubble right now. And they have their paintbrush, which is a scarf. And you're going to paint high. You play some kind of song, like it can be classical, some song they've been working on in class, preferably some kind of song that has no words. And so it just helps their creativity come alive. And so while they're using their scarf and you're in your bubble, you got to paint your whole bubble, right? You got to paint it high and you're moving your arms, but you got to move your body this way to paint and move your body this way to paint. Now you got to paint low and they got to bend down. They bend to the side. They can walk around in a circle, but they got to stay inside their bubble. So that's using creative movement because they're going high, low, side to side, walking. They can bend. They're using different ways to move their bodies. And I notice a lot that a lot of these students have never really explored ways to move their bodies before. They do some in PE and they probably dance at home. Like I said, my students, you know, they can dance, but when it came to creative movement and kind of creating movement on the spot, they've never really done that. And so just giving them ways to create movement that is separate from just dancing per se, you'll see that they really get creative with it because it's kind of like, oh, I didn't know my body could bend this way, or I didn't know about high, low, whatever. Okay, so creative movement. We talked about scarves using to paint. Another way to do scarves is you toss it up and you have to catch it. And that can kind of get a little crazy because they get excited. You can have them pass their scarf to a friend and catch it. Moving around, then we move around the room. We talked about the bubbles that stay in place and the bubbles that move around. The bubbles that move around are the ones who walk. They're inside their bubble, so that means they can't get in anyone else's bubble. And the reason I like the word bubble is because when they think of themselves inside of a bubble, they can't run into other kids because their bubble extends out, right? And it can't touch another person's bubble. And that really helps alleviate the running into other kids and bumping into them. That was something I loved, doing. And so they're walking around inside their bubble around the room. But now they can paint as they're walking. So they're moving around, but as the music, you'll see them naturally start kind of dancing a little bit while they're painting. They're using creative movement like that. So that's one of my favorite ways to do creative movement is with scarves. Another thing you can do is just to play music and not use scarves, but you call out different movements for them to do. We already talked about high, low, side to side. You can tell them to, you can call it different things to do. You can make it even silly, like hop like a bunny, or now we're going to climb a tree. Now we're anything to get them moving. It's not dance. It's different ways to use their bodies to move. And I'm going to go through examples in a minute in these books of some of my favorite movement activities. So this may end up being a little long, so bear with me. Okay, so individual movement. We talked about individual movement. That's inside your own bubble. You don't worry about what other kids around you are doing. You are just simply creating movement in your bubble on your own. Just like when it comes to improvising on instruments or body percussion, they're using their own personality and their ideas to create movement inside their bubble. So whole class movement. We're going to talk about folk dances in a minute. And like I said, I added a folk dance, and there's a couple other folk dances inside the academy right now. Folk dances is one of my favorite ways to do class movement. Another way you probably already are implementing class movement is by when you teach a program, if all the kids are doing movement together, that's class movement. That's doing movement as a class. So we're going to talk more about class movement in a minute, so bear with me. I'm kind of reading this as I go. So we talked about folk dances and then exploring how their body moves. Oh, another one is mirror movement. This is a great one where you're standing at the front of the class. So maybe your hands are like this, right? I'm trying to get my hands from the camera. And if you're moving like this, they're not moving. This is my right hand, right? They're not moving the right hand. They're moving their left hand because it's mirroring you. So they got to mirror what you do. And you can do a million different things. Your hands are high. And I know you can't see my whole body, but they're low. You're leaning. You're walking around. You're swaying your arms. And your students are mimicking what you do, okay? And that's a good way to get them to focus, but also they're mirroring movement that you're doing while you're doing it. And so we call that mirror movement. That's a good whole class activity as well. And then there's freeze dance, okay? This is a simple one, basically, that it's a good filler activity too if you have extra like 5-10 minutes at the end of your class, where basically you play music, and when you stop, they can dance. This is a good dance activity. When you stop the music, they have to freeze, okay? And so that's a simple one. Okay, so now let's talk, before I get into these books, how to change up movement for grade levels. So you can mirror movement with all grades, okay? With your lower elementary, keep it simple. With upper elementary, you can do like more moving around the room. With lower elementary, it's a lot more, staying in place. They can move around a little bit. With upper elementary, you could even maybe have 3 kids at the front of the classroom, and the students are mirroring in their own little groups. Or you can have them walking around the room more to do movement. Or when it comes to folk dances, which we'll talk more about in a minute, it gets a little harder with that also. With scarves, with the upper elementary kids, let them lead the activity as well as doing the activity. You're starting to put them more in leadership roles. And when they're using scarves, there's a lot more creative movement activities they can do with scarves. You could even do they can make a movement as a class, and then you could even do the movement in a round, not singing, but as a movement. And there's so many ways you can go with this. And there's a book down here in a minute that has scarf activities. So then the next thing I want to talk about, so we talked about demographic of students. I taught in a very urban school. So a lot, like I said, when I first started implementing some of this movement stuff, it was very hard. They were very resistant, this is new, this is foreign. It doesn't matter what demographic of students you teach, you'll probably notice some pushback everywhere, with no matter what demographic of students you teach. There's going to be pushback, like I said, to anything you teach. So what I would do is, if I noticed, let's go back to the scarves, for instance. I don't mean to harp on that for a million minutes, but when I handed them a scarf, so maybe I am playing classical music, but if I know they like to move their bodies a certain way, then we move our hips a little more. Or if I notice that they want, so then maybe I would throw in like a hip hop track in there. Still doesn't have words, but we've done the slow stuff. So now maybe add like a beat or a rhythm or a song or a background track that your students can relate to. So those are good ways to kind of know your students, back to knowing your students, your classroom, you're the teacher, and doing what they're comfortable with, right? There's nothing wrong with bringing popular music into your classroom. And it's up to you if you just want to do the track or have words to it. And then, okay, so talking about getting out of your comfort zone. We talked about that a little bit, but with anything, if you're uncomfortable, your students will be uncomfortable. If you walk in acting like you're a pro and you're like, I totally got this, you guys, I'm like the best mover ever, then they're going to respond to that. And if they see you excited about doing a movement activity that day, they're going to be excited about doing it. Not everyone. We can't, when we talked about those difficult students before, you're always going to have those 1 or 2 kids who, no matter what you do and how excited you are, they're still going to be like, and don't take it personally. Remember, we talked about that. Don't take it personally. And apologize if I'm talking fast. I am a fast talker, and so I do know that about myself. So let's talk about some of these resources, you guys. I think like I said, I don't think I linked to it in the description here, but if you go to thedomesticmusician.com, click on resources, and then if you click on, I don't remember what I called it. You know what? Can I look that up real quick? No, I'm not, because this will disappear. If you look up resources and then you click on, I think it's teaching materials, you'll see some of these books listed there that you can find on Amazon. All right. So the first one, I have talked about this before, Jump Jim Joe, is one of these books I learned about in, can you see that? Sorry if it's crooked. There we go. One of these books I learned about in an ORF workshop, and I was a little, like I said, a little scared because of the students I taught, but I'm going to show you a couple of my favorites from this book that are, okay, so this one, it's actually the first one in the book, called Circle Round the Zero. Sorry if that's blurry. I don't know how to get that. You can see the title a little bit, right? Circle Round the Zero is one of my favorite books. My favorite folk dances to do with younger elementary students because it's super easy. And then the thing with folk dances, is when you teach it once towards the beginning of the school year, then if you say we're going to do circle around the zero later in the school year, you don't have to reteach it again. Then you can simply just put the song on and the students know how to do the dance, and it's super fast and super fun, and then you can add to it even. So that's it's a really easy one. The students can learn quick. Okay, so head and shoulders is another really fun one that the students love to do. And I wanted to point out one more. I'm not going to go through every song in this book, but like every book you get, probably any teaching, here's Alabama Gal. It's exactly where I got this from, by the way. With any teaching book you get, you're going to go, what I would do, and we'll talk about curriculum another day, but what I do is go through every resource I have, any resource I found, any curriculum, any ORF training, any whatever, and I pick what I want to teach. If it's teaching the standards, your students are learning, you don't need to go, okay, we did page 19, tomorrow we're doing page 20. We did page 21, tomorrow we're doing, I know, that's like the old school way of teaching. And if you're doing that, I'm not trying to give you a hard time at all. I'm just saying go through, really take the time. It does take time. It's time consuming. Maybe it's in a summer or something where you go through and look through your resources and you figure out what materials from each of those resources you want to teach from. And that's exactly how I did it. And then you figure out what grade level could I do this with. And then also some of these folk dances, there is a song called Jump Jim Joe, but some of these resources are harder for your lower elementary students. So just like an Alabama Gal, where the video I just added, the video lesson, I talked in there about if there's, that one's pretty difficult. You know, you peel the banana, the kids are jumping down the middle and all kinds of other crazy stuff. If that's too hard for your younger elementary and they can't do like 4 things, then you just have them simply go down the middle with a partner, come back with a partner, and then you go to the end of the line. The next partners go down the middle with a partner, come back. You just look at what the instructions are for movement. And what I do for lower elementary, if it says it's an upper elementary activity, but I'm like, well, my younger kiddos would love this too, then I modify it. I say, okay, we're going to just cut out all this movement and just simply do part 1. And they'll repeat part 1 no matter what the words are over and over and over and over and over. That's a simple way to start teaching folk dances. Even if folk dances are new to your upper elementary, I did the same thing. I would say, you know what? There's about 567 movement activities in this, or movement steps, and I'm just going to simply do step 1. And that's exactly how to start. Okay, my next book I would recommend for movement is called As American as Apple Pie, Folk Songs, Games, and Dances. So yes, there's games in here too. But same thing is you go through and pick out your favorites or things that you want to teach. And it doesn't matter if, you know, teacher down the street's doing it, and it doesn't matter if you don't get to everything. That's totally fine. One of my favorites is called Shake Those Simmons Down. And it's basically one of the reasons when I first started teaching folk dances, I like this song a lot. There's White Out. I don't even remember why I did that, but this is the reason I like this song to begin teaching folk dances, is because it's one of the easiest to do, because as you're singing the words, it basically tells you what to do. It says circle left, duo, circle left. So then basically the kids are in a circle and they're circling left. And then you go circle right, and then you swing your partner, and then you swing your corner, and that gets a little crazy. But this is a good book that has a lot of activities and as it goes on, it gets a little more difficult, adds ORF instruments, movement, it's singing, obviously, and it tells you step by step what to do. But like I said, it's the ones at the beginning are the easiest. Another book I found that I really liked was called the Body Rondo book. Okay, this is really good for body percussion, which we've talked about body percussion when we talked about improvising the other week, about, you know, creating, composing and songwriting in your classroom, even using body percussion. So a good way, so I'm going to show you what I did here. This book, it gets a little hard, but it shows you at the beginning what, see, I'm having a hard time looking at the camera and the, because it's kind of like opposite. Okay, so CL's for clap, and then P for pat. And I wrote stomp there because instead of patting, I had my students stomp. And I went through, for me, teaching rhythms is important, obviously. Teaching them to count rhythms, no matter what counting system you use, whether it's TT-TA or another counting system. But also, a good way to teach rhythms is by adding words. So here's what I did here. Hershey bars, we love them. Hershey bars, we love them. Hershey bars, we love them. Stomp, Hershey bars. And then the next line, Mr. Goodbar, we love you so very much. Mr. Goodbar, we love Crackle too. I don't think I spelled that right. And then the last line, we love our Hershey's, we love our Hershey's, we love our Hershey's, Hershey bars. So, of course, that's going to be a good way for your students to remember this activity. But it's also, it teaches them form, A, I can't see it, B, and C. There's difficult rhythms in here, and it tells them, so the A section is going to have two, so you'll split your students into two parts, or you could even just make this a one-line thing. You don't have to do two different body percussion parts if you don't want to. So that is a good way to teach movement, because body percussion, as we all know, it's good for improvising with, but it's also great for teaching rhythm. So if you're really into wanting to get started with body percussion, that's a great book. I'm going to go to these in a minute. So as you can see, I have some sticky, why did I just forget what these are called? Sticky notes. What is wrong with me? When you watch this, please comment and tell me what these are called. Oh my gosh, you guys, my brain. Yeah, sticky notes. That's not what they're called, is it? Good grief. Anyways, Busy Kids Movement. This is a book I actually found a long time ago, as you can tell by these. The paper's ripping apart. At, your local teacher store that just sells teaching books and stuff, stickers, pencils, whatever. It wasn't even a music teacher store. It was just a regular teaching store. And I found this book there, and I was like, I started looking through it. I was trying to find more stuff for my younger elementary kids. And this was back to my first year of teaching when it was all new. And I knew getting anybody that music was new to all of my students, not just the younger ones. So this book has some stuff that's looks like for PE, like using hula hoops and stuff. But I went through here and found the things, like, let me show you this one. Found the activities that the kids would enjoy doing in music class. So this one called Catch the Christmas Spirit. Basically, they use balloons. Now, if balloons makes you intimidated and you're like, yeah, right, I'm not getting a bunch of balloons in my classroom because the kids are going to pop them and go crazy. This, you could use, I've used wadded up paper before. We've used, I borrowed bean bags from the PE teacher. You can use anything, and basically they're tossing them up and catching them. So there's different easy movement activities in this book. And like I said, I went through, okay, here's one you can do with scarves called Juggling Time. Okay, and you're basically what we talked about, talking about how to toss the scarf. So this book has really good ideas for your younger students, even if you teach preschool movement. One-on-one music games for children. In this one, music games, but it's not just games. And I love let me show you in here. I love this beginning. Why can't I get this straight? It talks about what the games are, or and tells you what they are. Listening games, concentration, musical quizzes, games for introduction and getting to know each other, interaction, trust games, games for self-expression, and improvisation, seeking and guessing, and musical board games. But what I love about it is it tells you, is it for young children, older children, or teens and adults? But this is not, the reason I'm showing you this book is it's not just for games. Let me go to an activity. There's movement activities in here too. So for instance, because games and music, they teach all kinds of different stuff, right? I'm sorry, y'all. I'm looking. Hold on a second. Oh, this one. Okay, well, that's freeze dance, which that's not. I had it pulled up. I had it to the right page before we started. Oh, here we go. Mirror with sounds. Okay. This one talks about having a partner and facing each other, playing music, and you just basically earlier we talked about mirroring, you for movement. They mirror their partner. But this book is just good, not just for movement, but there's just so many games that really helped with filling time at the end of the class period and stuff like that. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent. Okay, I'm done searching in that book because I can't find what I'm looking for. This one, the Book of Movement and Exploration. It's a really good one. If you have any questions about these, by the way, if you can't see the titles or the author, please just comment in this video and ask or email me, and I would be happy to send these ideas your way. Okay, so this one includes ideas for awareness of body parts and whole body, awareness of time, awareness of space, awareness of levels, how to move, awareness of weight, awareness of locomotion, awareness of flow, awareness of shape, awareness of others. My goodness, you guys, this book, as you can see, once again, getting started with teaching movement, this helped a whole lot, a whole lot. Getting started and having your students be comfortable with movement. I mean, I'm telling you, it has. I'll show you an example. So for instance, here's, and my pages are falling out, but whole body movement, there's like a bunch of different activities for that. And it breaks it down for you, if you're new to teaching movement, how to do that. So now the last thing I want to talk about before we go is what another great way to, actually this is a great music integration activity for literacy, is to use stories to do movement in your classroom. So I brought 2 books that I want to show you, and there's a ton of other books, and I'm going to be writing a blog post actually about movement. It's not going to include nearly what we talked about in this video, but there are a few other books I'll probably recommend in there as well. One of my favorite movement books that I couldn't find, it's somewhere, I don't know where, but Dinosaur Rumpus is one of my favorite books because the kids, basically what you do is you're reading this story, and when the kids hear what the dinosaurs are doing, they have to stand up and do what the dinosaurs are doing. And so basically the dinosaurs are stomping, I think they're stopping, twirling, one at the very end they're sleeping, skipping, jumping, whatever the dinosaurs are doing, your students have to respond to that and move their bodies, how the story's saying they're doing. Shake, shake, shudder, and then there's dancing. It's such a fun book. I just couldn't find it, but Dinosaur Rumpus, if you look that up, you'll find it. And okay, so the other one, this is another one called The Little Engine That Could. This is a book this is great for lower elementary students. So you've probably seen this book before, but basically what you can do is anytime you talk about what the train is doing, the kids can make that motion like a train, right? They can go faster or slower. It's a great way to teach tempo. But the other thing to do in books is when you see a bunch of different, basically I would open a book and go, okay, so this page has a bunch of different animals, right? So student 1, you're the elephant. Student 2, you're the giraffe. You're the monkey, so on and so forth. And every time, or you call it different words, like anytime you hear the word cars, you have to move your arm like this. If you hear the word toys, you have to stand up and do this. So you give each, it's not necessarily every student, but each group of kids, maybe five words. And you give them a movement they have to do to that word when you say that word. Excuse me, you guys. Goodness. I'm so sorry. And then the last book I want to talk about, which there are tons of books that you can read to your students that they can do movement to the words you're reading. Either the book has movement words that, like I talked about Dinosaur Rumpus, with it talks about stomping and twirling and dancing, or it's books like this one where you are giving them a word they have to create movement. They do a certain movement to when they hear their word come in. And then here's one of Pete the Cat. Who doesn't like Pete the Cat books, you guys? I mean, come on. And he's talking about rocking in his school shoes. I mean, it's perfect. So basically, This is a fun one because the kids can pretend they have their rock guitar, and anytime they say they're rocking in their school shoes, or they're reading in their school shoes, or they're whatever else they're doing in their school shoes, eating, they play their rock guitar. They pretend, and you'll see the kids, some of them go really like this, some are just strumming in place, some are, they get into it. They rock out. It's so much fun. So these are some suggestions to help you with movement in your classroom. Like I said, start slow. If you're already doing movement in your classroom, then awesome. If you're already doing everything I suggested, then great. If you're not, then ask me questions in this group, you guys. Email me. I love to answer emails. Schedule a one-on-one phone call with me. Let's talk about it, how you can implement movement in your classroom.